نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And welcome to YouTube. The reason why I say that is because I'm platform jumping. We started today early on at 4 o'clock on Tafsir, which was in Purto, the native tongue that I speak, and that was on YouTube, which is where we're back. And then we had the Tafsir in English on Facebook, which was 5 till 6. Then 6 till 6:15, we made an introduction to Sayyidul Khatir, which is about captured thoughts of Imam Jawzi and how a person's reflections and how they can influence a person's life. And now today you join me here at 7 o'clock in the UK time, till about half past or thereabouts, in which we're going to speak about the Path of Muḥammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what is that about really? Well, it's a text which we're going to use. I got the English copy here, but I've also got the Arabic on my iPad. And so we'll probably go through the Arabic, but I'm just using this as an example so that at least we can focus on some introductions that have been put together. And it's by a scholar called Imam Birgiwi, or Birgiwi, or Birkiwi, if you do the Arabicized version, who's around the 16th century scholar, particular Sufi scholar, and his focus was on morals and ethics. But an interesting thing is where I bought this book from, it's a company called Deep Books Limited, and this book is pretty deep, so I guess I bought it from the right shop. Anyway, so it says this is available, this text, and as I said, I've got the Arabic as well. Today we're just going to start a little bit of an introduction about what this means. And you may have heard Sufi and Tasawwuf and words to that effect and somewhat being confused that is this part of Islam, is this separate from Islam, is this an invention, is this a bid'ah, is this, what is this? Well, a little bit of a history lesson. One of my early involvements with Islam was from a Sufi perspective. Like most children, not that I'm a child now, but like most children, I attended Maktab from a very young age. I think it was probably about 3-4 years old. Alhamdulillah, was fortunate enough to start the memorization of the Quran when I was again a young boy. And then things, fate took over, so to speak, and we traveled to Pakistan for a few weeks. And when we came back, we didn't return back to the house that we were in, which is in Hanover Square for those of us who know Bradford well. Instead, we ended up going to a street not so far away, so half a mile away, but traveling down to my original masjid was proving very difficult because I was 9 years old or something, 10 years old max, and my brother was 7, 8, and I was responsible for my brother, so it proved a little bit too difficult to walk down to the masjid and back. So my mum, trying to wear as many hats as possible, took the responsibility upon herself to start to teach us or carry on with our memorization of the Quran. Well, I guess it doesn't take a genius to deduce that didn't happen, unfortunately. The rumor has it I was a little bit of a rebel, and as a result, I was easily distracted. I prefer the easily distracted rather than the rebel. Rebel sounds more devious, whereas easily distracted sounds more innocent. Anyway, whichever one we adopt, what we found was that I had to drop it then, and when I dropped it, then I kind of got involved in school life and the rest of it until eventually the Tablighi Jamaat calling came, and I got very much involved in there because people in our street, in our masjid, were very much involved in that. However, that didn't really kind of appeal to me. They're too regimented. It just seemed, overly regimented and practices, and I'm a bit of a maverick anyway. It's my normal mindset, and for me, it just didn't really kind of work for me. So even though I spent a few sessions here and there, it didn't really sort of satisfy my kind of spiritual leaning. It was then I kind of went towards the Tasawwuf route, studied it greatly as a topic, as a science first. This was my sort of late teens, early 20s, so yeah, not so long ago. And then it was a case of sort of, following a path, and that was the Tariqa Bushishia, which is the one that I followed, Moroccan-based sheikh. And that was the path that I took for, quite a long time, nearly up to a decade or so, maybe just under, until obviously things start troubling me. in terms of practices which I found, which originally I kind of maybe just turned a blind eye to, but became more and more prominent as I pursued my activities. I'm not going to go into the experiences that I had and what level of adhkar I was doing and the rest of it. But let's put it this way: it was I did stay in it for long enough, for a long time, because there was some spiritual satiation or satisfaction. Until, like I said, it became too difficult to accept, and that was the time when I started to study the Zahiri funun, yani the fiqh, and that's where I went. And it was maybe few years I'd been studying that until I that yearning came back to the spiritual answering, and then I adopted the Naqshbandi tariqah for quite a long time. So this was well into maybe 2009, 10 or something like that, until even that strict regimental issue I couldn't really fit in. It was, I wanted to go to the Sunnaic way. I wasn't too comfortable with adhkar and wirds, awrad, which hadn't been necessarily handed down directly from the Prophet ﷺ. I'm not saying that they're wrong. It just didn't fit for me. It just wasn't. I didn't find it comfortable. So I started to do adhkar of what I found within the Sunan, and I followed that. And that's where my path has been for the last decade or so since then. And that's the advice I give to students who want some kind of spiritual guidance or spiritual reformation. And it's quite strange then, or quite coincidental or not as it may be, that the book that I chose, with, again, shout out to our friend Mr. Arnold, with discussions with him, was a book that he found useful, and it's a tariqatul Muhammadiyah, because Imam Birghawi seems to have reached the same kind of goal. And allow me to share some words with you from the text, the introduction, not necessarily the text itself. That will be our activities for tomorrow. I'm not necessarily going to talk about the translation itself. That's not what is of interest to me, but more just the text itself and what it's about. So we have here Imam Birghawi's manual of what's referred to ethical conduct and spiritual practice, which is called the At-Tariqatul Muhammadiyah. Now, as a method, this was something which came about in the late 15th century, Morocco, and then it went further into India, into then also towards the Ottomans. And the path was to bring about the Sunnah method, not just in the Zahir Sunnah method, but also in the Batini Sunnah method. So the realization which took place in what could be the 15th century, I had that same kind of realization probably in, as I said, around sort of 2009, 8, 10, that kind of area. So we're talking maybe about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I had that same kind of realization that, the various turuqs that existed, whether it was the Naqshbandi, the Chishti and the others, the formulaic methods, the awrad, the adhkar, I just didn't feel comfortable, especially since I couldn't find them within the Sunan, and this, therefore, so my realization, or my spiritual realization back about 10 or so years ago, kind of reflects on this 15th century realization which took place in Morocco, and that was to re-engage with the Prophet ﷺ, in essence, to engage with his aspects. So as a result, this text is somewhat a text, like I said, which dawns on me. It's mentioned here within the introduction that the first time this text was used, or the term was used rather, At-Tariq al-Muhammadiyah, was by Abdullah al-Ghazwani, who was a Moroccan Sufi. This is going back in the 16th century, who was a Bedouin, and is considered as one of the 7 saints of Marrakesh. And he was known as Mul al-Qusur, the master of the palaces. And when he has a work which is written, he refers to this as the method of the Muhammadan Sunnah and the technique of Suluk al-Nazra al-Azaliyah. Okay, so we start to see that that's where the term starts to be used. I've not seen the term being used as because I don't study the the science as a kind of a historical topic. I obviously, from all the shuyukh that I've ever been taken bait with, it's always been, they've told me this is a science of dhawq and not a science of the mind. This is a science of the heart. And you will learn more by experiential, by experiencing things, not necessarily by being told. But unfortunately, our brain is something which can't be restrained. And the brain always wants answers, and the brain wants answers now. And the heart is something which takes longer to change, and it takes a while to come out from its various states of perception, if we can use that word. So this is why the term came, and I guess, and I assume that this was always also a case because practices or tariqas became empty shells. They became kind of like club for the boys, or you were either linked to them, or you became, so you tied your amama in a very different way to everybody else. It became very elitist. You performed acts of worship in a different way, which instead of the Sunnaic ways to bring people together, to see uniformity in Islam, what we were seeing is change now, and then everyone claiming that each path is sound, each path is correct. So this is so we see here, for example, then we see a link between the Moroccan Sufi and Imam Birghawi's teachers. For example, Muhammad al-Laqani, who taught Imam Birghawi. So we see this connection, and we also find that this text then, in essence, sort of takes over the text, which was originally Al-Ghaznawi's text. Al-Ghaznawi was of the Juzuliya Sufi order, which was predominant in Morocco in the 15th and 16th centuries, which was a combination of both the Shadiliya and the Qadiriya traditions, which was founded by the Sufi Sheikh Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Jazuli, which was again sort of mid-15th century. And remember, Imam Jazuli, for those who may not be familiar, is the one who authored Dalailul Khairat, and this is widely available across the globe, because again it's durood upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what you see is that this methodology which became known to be then at-Tariqatul Muhammadiyya, focuses very much on the Sunnah, focuses very much on kind of reconnecting with that past and refraining from adopting other sorts of characteristics, other sort of awrad and adhkar which may be handed down by Sufi sheikhs, but may not necessarily have a foundation within the Sunni, within the tradition itself, if we went back to the original sources. And this is why it was sort of widely accepted as well, because of its nature. So this was written by Imam Birghawi as a sort of handbook, really, more than anything else, even though you'll see it's not a handbook as such. It's a kind of a basis for a position, for an argument, which is embedded in nusus, which is its attractive nature. Because, as I mentioned, that the tasawwuf as a whole and Sufi practices have been heavily bashed, and rightly so in some places, because we see practices which are bid'ah without any shadow of doubt. Some of the issues that I experienced which made me leave certain tariqs is because of the practices that I saw. Now, even though an argument was made for them or a justification was put for them, I found that deeply uncomfortable, and I found that deeply difficult. At first, I just thought this is my nafs perception of them, that my nafs itself is, it's not allowing me to accept the truth, so to speak, and therefore I forced myself to carry on down that path a lot longer than maybe I would have done if I just attached my mind and what I was experiencing. So you find that is very close. So some have said that this is now become the replacement for the Jazuliya Tariqa as such, because the text as such has disappeared of Imam Jazuli's, so therefore this kind of replaced it. And some have said that. And we also see now that people will recite the Dalailul Khairat in circles, in practices, in order to go forward with that. So this is the text we have before us, inshallah, and this is the one that I will share with you. Now, what he does is that he covers numerous topics. I'll just go through the list of the topics he covers, and then we'll bring today's session to a close, and we'll start on one of the topics tomorrow. So this first, which makes absolute sense, is holding firmly onto the Quran and to the Sunnah. So clearly, right from the word go, you see a very traditional, if I can use that word, a very authentic, if I can use that word, and also deeply embedded within the tradition, the nusus, this tariqah is. So the first thing is establishing what is right. Secondly is about the bid'ah, the difficult, the bid'ah, the troublesome bid'ah. So that comes next. So we establish what is right, and then we remove anything which is wrong. He then moves on to deeds itself, and then on to beliefs, yani believing in the religion that Prophet ﷺ brought. Then on knowledge, righteousness, the state of a person when he's denial of Allah, self-indulgence, this is the nafs, and blind imitation, an interesting topic which we can discuss in detail. And then more of the illnesses of the soul, illnesses of the nafs, sanctimony and hypocrisy, where one acts in a certain way compared to the way one is, ambition, which obviously in this context is a negative thing, where a person will try to up himself, try to position himself as superior to others. Identifying evil. Evil is something which is hard to label. What is evil? What is evil in a world in which there is no religion now? How does a non-religious, an atheistic paradigm consider evil? What is evil in that context? We know what evil is from a Shari perspective. Envy, anger, negative traits which exist in a person, which are normally fast. Al-ajlatu min ash-shaytan, things which are haste, things which are done in haste. We get angry, it's an emotion which happens very quickly. Envy is an emotion which happens very quickly. Wal-anatu min Allah, forbearance, sabr is a difficult thing to do. Practicing forbearance, practicing patience is not easy. It's quelling your natural reaction to something and trying to calm the waters. And then relating to the matters of this world, like things, items. So we have avarice, wastefulness, and then on the other hand we have generosity and detachment. Money, which is obviously one of the goods of this world. And then, as I've already touched upon, haste. Haste is get another mention specifically on itself. And then hopelessness, which can lead to many other illnesses like depression, poor mental health, sadness, which can sadly then lead on to taking one's life or detaching from the world. So hopelessness as a nafs. Use of the tongue. We hear many times that the tongue is more dangerous than the spear and the arrow. Listening, not hearing. Sometimes we don't differentiate between listening and hearing. Looking, touching, eating and drink. Even though something can be halal, doesn't necessarily mean the way we're eating it and in the quantity we're eating it is sound. Sex as well. Topic which obviously is one of the functions of a human engages in, and therefore as a result needs some kind of etiquettes and morals associated with it. Coming and going. And finally on private and social offences which should be avoided. So that's the kind of outlay of the text, inshallah, which I hope you've had an opportunity to get a feel for. Tomorrow when you join me, we'll jump in straight away into holding firm to the Quran and the Sunnah. And you'll see it doesn't come as a surprise that there will be numerous verses of the Quran recited and mentioned, and also numerous narrations cited. So inshallah ta'ala, we may not get each chapter done per day. We have up to half an hour, depending on how things are going. And I hope you can join me again tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. Wa akhir da'wana. And alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.